Hey, Harbor Church family, my name is Joel Thomas, and I'm the lead pastor here. Can I just say, man, I'm so thankful that you are with us today as we wrap up our series, The Invitation. As we've said all along, we're going to wrap this series up with a celebration Sunday, because here's what's true. We are meant to be a people of celebration. As we've talked throughout this series, that when we accept God's invitation to pray, mountains will move. And so people have sent in stories. This Sunday is going to be a little different. We're going to break it up a little bit. We're going to have some message time. We're going to have worship. You're going to have an interview with one of our members here at Harbor Church sharing the crazy year they have had and how they have said yes to God's invitation to pray through all of it. We're going to share some stories that many of you have sent in of the things that have happened in your life that you want to celebrate. Again, because we are a people meant to celebrate. We're to be a people of celebration. And this begins even in the Old Testament itself. And I want to say that those of you that are watching, whether you have decided or not to claim the name of Christ, whether you've maybe put Jesus in the driver's seat of your life and look to him as your Lord, man, I can tell you that you were created for celebration, but specifically, man, if you're a follower of God, man, you were designed, right? It was baked in from the very beginning. I think about the story of the Exodus, right? We find this literally in the book of Exodus, chapter 15, right? You've got the Israelites, the Hebrews that are finding themselves for over 400 years. They're in bondage. They're in slavery in Egypt. They have been accepting God's invitation to pray for more than 400 years. God, would you hear us, see us? Would you redeem us? Would you bring us out of slavery and bondage and into this moment after 400 years of praying and crying out, right? Accepting God's invitation to pray, God hears them. And he taps a shepherd, Moses, in the desert in Mount Sinai, right? He taps him and says, you're going to be my guy. After 40 years of being a shepherd, he sends Moses back to Egypt in response to the prayers of the Israelites, in the response to the prayers of his people. And he goes in, and many of us are familiar with the story. And right, Moses goes to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's not having it. And you've got the plagues and all of that. And you've got the Passover that we celebrate to this day. But finally, right, roughly 3 million of the nation of Israel, right, they cross on dry land as the Red Sea parts, all part of God's response to the cries and prayers of his people. And they cross over that. The waters come back and they fall down on Pharaoh, on his army, horses, chariots tossed aside. And what do the people of God do? They bust into spontaneous song and celebration. Exodus 15:1. Then Moses and the people of Israel sang this song to the Lord. I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. He has hurled both horse and rider into the sea. Again, we are meant to be a people of celebration. We go on through the Old Testament. You get to the story of David. You get to the story specifically of the Ark of the Covenant. For many of you watching this, right, the Ark brings up, right, images of Steven Spielberg and Indiana Jones. I want to tell you, actually, the design of the Ark in that movie is very, very biblically accurate in many ways. But the Ark in that season, right, the Ark represented God's physical presence on the world, in the world, among the nation of Israel. And the Ark had fallen out of the nation of Israel's hands. It had fallen into enemy hands. And again, after prayer and seeking God, God was moving. And he was bringing and allowing the Ark to be brought back into the nation of Israel, specifically into his chosen city of Jerusalem. And as the late King David leads a procession, priests and all the people, they're leading it back into the city of Jerusalem. They bust into natural and spontaneous celebration. 2 Samuel 6:15 says, so David and all the people of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouts of joy and the blowing of ram's horns. It says that David, right, he basically strips down and just dances crazy before the Lord because, again, right, when we accept God's invitation to pray, it results in stories of celebration. Throughout history, we see this pattern repeated over and over again in Scripture. Finally, we see it even into the New Testament, into a passage and a scene in Scripture that unfortunately we almost exclusively hear taught only during the Easter season. Specifically, right, Palm Sunday, the story of the triumphal entry. Once again, it's a story of God's people being a people of celebration. Right, we've got Jesus. It's one of the few stories that's recorded in every one of the gospel records. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all record this scene. I think because it's such a scene of celebration. Right? It's an answer to prayer. Jesus, after 3.5 years of his earthly ministry, is entering into Jerusalem. He's walking through the city gates. He's doing it to fulfill scripture, right? He's doing it to fulfill prophecy. He's doing it to fulfill the prayers of the people of God, right? It's his last time entering through the city gates before he heads to the cross at the end of that week. But as he walks in, his people, followers of Jesus, believers in the one true God, erupt in spontaneous shouts of celebration. Luke 19:37, it says, when he reached the place where the road started down the Mount of Olives, all of his followers began to shout and sing as they walked along, praising God for all the wondrous miracles they had seen. Again, as followers of Jesus, as believers in the one true God, we are a people meant for celebration. But I think there's a problem here. I think the problem is found that we allow our circumstances to dictate our celebrations. Let me say that again. It's going to be here on the screen. But too often we allow our circumstances to dictate our celebrations, right? We go, well, I would celebrate, but things are rough right now, and this is hard, or this isn't working. And let's be honest, man, I can certainly acknowledge the environment we find ourselves in now, in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of political upheaval, in the midst of racial tension. This is a difficult season, and it's a season that feels maybe even harder to celebrate, but maybe more important for us to celebrate. But again, like I said, too often we allow our circumstances to dictate our celebrations. We seem to live under this if-then rule of life. It's this idea that, right, if I get that promotion, then I'll celebrate. If that relationship works out, then I'll celebrate. If the test backs come back clear, then I'll celebrate. If the COVID restrictions loosen, then I'll celebrate. If my candidate wins, then I'll celebrate. If kids can go back to in-person school, then I'll celebrate. If the vaccine works, then I'll celebrate. If people stop being mean and stupid, then I'll celebrate. But I think all of us understand, man, that's a fallacy to believe that way. Because if we tie celebration to our circumstances, then we never will. If we tie celebration to our circumstances, we never will. I think about just a lesson my mom taught me years ago. I was working in Southern California. I was at a church camp. I was there all summer, and it was not going well. It was really painful, difficult. I was single. It was just a lot of reasons. And back in the days when you literally had to go to the payphone and call someone, I'm standing in the payphone booth on the phone to my mom. I'm crying. I'm complaining, right? Life is painful and hard and overwhelming. And she just reminded me. She said, Joel, as long as you base your reason for celebration and joy and happiness on external circumstances working out, then you never will. And she refocused me on the truth that I believe in as a follower of God. She goes, we have a God who is always working out things for our best. We have much to celebrate every day if we would just shift our attitude and our attention to his will and his purposes. Because here's what's true of celebration. Celebration elevates our soul in spite of our circumstances. Celebration elevates our soul in spite of our circumstances. And so what I want to do is we're going to go into an interview now that I recently had with a member of Harbor Church, Kevin Evans. And I want you to hear from him the ability that he's had to continue to celebrate God in the midst of a crazy circumstance. Let's go to that now. As I was saying, we are a people meant for celebration. Right? There's always things that we can choose to celebrate, even through the most difficult times. And this is, for sure, a difficult season, I think, for so many of us. And as I mentioned, we're going to look at kind of 3 areas that we can always choose to celebrate. We can always choose to use celebration in a way of really elevating our souls even. And the first one is this, that we can choose to celebrate God for who He is. You know, when we tie our celebration and our happiness to external circumstances, we'll never have enough to celebrate, right? The idea is it makes life kind of a series of unsettling events at best. There becomes nothing solid to cling to. This just isn't the case. It's actually during seasons of confusion and unsettledness that we most need to cling to who God is, because that is constant and unchanging no matter the pain of our present circumstances. You know, Psalm 100 verse 5, it says, "For the Lord is good, and His unfailing love continues forever, and His faithfulness continues to each generation." And it's this idea of choosing to celebrate God for who He is, and why I invited Kevin Evans. He's one of our members here at Harbor Church, and really, Kevin, you've become a great friend of mine. I don't know if you realize, a bit of a mentor. You've got a big family. I have a big family, right? You're a little further down the road, although your hair's turning darker, and mine, as we said before starting to record this, mine keeps getting wider. I'm going back. Something's wrong there. That's a bad thing. But in this idea of always, right, we can choose to celebrate God for who He is. Why don't you give us some background on what this last year has been like for you?
Oh, absolutely. And for me, this last year was a totally different season of my life, something I never experienced before. And the first thing that I would tell you, of course, is starting on vacation last year. You know, go on vacation to get rid of all your, excess stress
right.
and have fun and live. And of course, a day or so before I left for vacation, I started having symptoms. Something was wrong on vacation with our...
What time last year?
It was October 25th of last year.
So just over a year.
24th, yeah, last year. Okay. Absolutely, just over a year. Got back in from vacation and had a great vacation. Got into to see the doctor the day after I got back, and started going through a number of tests for celiac, for Crohn's, for any of the gastrointestinal diseases that are prevalent. And everything started pointing towards my pancreas. And of course, we started doing more and more tests, and finally, right before Thanksgiving, we did, they went in and did a CAT scan. And the CAT scan came up and said, there's a mass on my pancreas. Went to the first week of December and got the diagnosis that indeed, after the biopsy, was adenocarcinoma, which is pancreatic cancer. And everything I've ever known and heard, and of course talking to doctors, pancreatic cancer is the second most deadly cancer there is, next to lung cancer. It was not what I expected to hear.
Sure.
We were moving forward, and it was supposed to happen on the 19th of December, and basically what ended up happening was we wanted to get it done as quick as possible, and they were looking at doing it in January and maybe even 1st of February.
And doing what?
Doing the surgery.
Okay, so talk to us. So you find out, you get, right, the diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, which many of us have heard, known other people in the media, in news, celebrities that have had pancreatic cancer.
Michael Landon, Patrick Swayze, of course.
Right, and so we go, that's a death sentence. This is a big deal.
Right.
And so their solution first is to have pretty invasive surgery.
Absolutely.
And so what are they looking to do?
They're looking to take away probably half of my innards.
Yeah.
That's the best way I always can explain it.
You get the diagnosis the end of November.
I get the diagnosis, and it's really funny, is these are all circumstances like we're talking about that can steal your joy, steal your happiness, steal everything. The funny thing was I felt peace about it the whole time. I know that the Lord loves me and has a plan for me, and I just want to do what His will is and follow His will. And really, we weren't bothered by it at all. What ended up happening was we ended up getting moved up, and thank God we did. So instead of doing it on December 19th, I got a day and a half or doing our evaluation, they called me up on the 17th at noon.
Was
36.
this December?
Yeah, this is in December, 36 hours before, and basically they did another CAT scan, they did physical evaluation for surgery, and I met with the surgeon. And 36 hours later, instead of doing my evaluation, I was now in surgery.
Surgery, to do the procedure.
To do the procedure. And again, this is all God's timing, thank God, because if I would have had it done later in January or in the 1st of February, I would have been right in the middle of COVID outbreak at the very beginning. I was in a hospital afterwards for another 30 days, and I was in late January, got out of the hospital, and 3 weeks later, go on chemo to make sure that it didn't spread.
So you have a very invasive, very
Absolutely.
significant procedure.
Absolutely.
Takes a while for your system to reconnect, process that, loss of weight, right?
55 pounds,
Right, so significant loss of weight.
significant loss, which is probably a good
Plus
thing.
the stress, right, that puts
Yep.
on you, your wife Susan, your children, right, your business. You own a business here locally in Denver.
Absolutely.
A lot of that. And then you get to go out of that and then go into chemo, which has its own
which is
special gift of fun things.
Right, which was another 6 months, and I'd go in every Wednesday at 7:30 in the morning, and I would leave generally between 3 and 4 in the afternoon after having 5 bags of chemicals pumped into me, and then I'd leave with a pump that ran for another 48 hours, pumping more chemicals into me, and I'd have to take them all off at home, and just the fatigue, the everything associated with it. The neuropathy, which I still have lingering effects. But yeah, not fun. Fatigue, drained all the color out of me, started losing 60% of my hair.
Yeah.
It was not fun.
No.
I wouldn't want to do it again.
And then, right, and then you finish chemo, and then there's more procedures to
Right.
continue to work on the plumbing, right?
Right, absolutely.
You got to kind of fine tune it and dial in the plumbing.
Absolutely.
And so there's been at least 2, maybe 3 more procedures
There's
since chemo.
2 more procedures. The first one failed. The second one, they sent me to University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Center to have the pros work on it. And
So you go through that. You're right. So all of this. Now here
Yes.
we are, a little over a year removed from that.
Right.
There's still stuff, right? The road is not clear.
Oh, absolutely.
There's still stuff ahead of you. I mean, just the median life expectancy after a diagnosis was how much?
54 months
54 months.
for all types of pancreatic cancer, correct?
And so 4.5 years, right? We're a little over a year into that 4.5 years.
Right.
You and Susan, you're talking kind of, right, will and, how to wrap things up with it, all those kind of things. And again,
absolutely.
we could spend really hours
Yes, we could.
kind of talking through that. I want to come back to this idea, right? The psalmist in chapter 100, verse 5 writes, "For the Lord is good.
Absolutely.
His unfailing love continues forever, and his faithfulness continues to each generation." If you follow Kevin on social media, on Facebook, and if you've been friends with him as I have, he certainly had bad days.
Oh, absolutely.
And there will be bad days in front of you, most likely.
Absolutely.
But what he has stated, and part of why I invited you to be a part of this, is as we look, right, we can always choose to celebrate God for who he is, right? There's not been a healing. You're not done with it. There's
No.
still a process. You're, if anything, you're at the beginning of it still.
Absolutely.
And yet along the way, Kevin has stated, right, his confidence, your trust in the Lord,
Absolutely.
your joy.
is not going to be robbed by circumstances. None whatsoever.
Why? I mean, how do you say that?
I'm very
Right? How can we continue to celebrate for who God is, right? The psalmist says the Lord is good. And you go, is he good when I have bags pumping chemicals into me, right? Is he good when most of my innards have been removed and reconnected? Is he good when I get continued infections? I think for those of you that may be watching this, maybe you are in the midst of that. I know other folks at Harbor, you've got cancer. You've got a significant illness. Maybe it's a relational issue, right? You're in the midst of a broken and painful relationship, and you're like, boy, joy and celebration seems the farthest away and everything seems unsettled and nothing seems stable,
Right.
I think you would agree that that's the time it's most important to cling to the unchanging character of good. The psalmist said, the Lord is good. The psalmist doesn't give any qualifiers to it.
Oh, absolutely.
And so how's that work for you through this experience?
Well, really, the way it's worked for me is number one, I didn't initiate my love for Christ.
Okay,
He-
explain that, right? For some folks, that may seem strange.
Right. You know, we all like to think we have the ability to help other people and talk them into Christ.
Yeah.
You know, the scripture clearly says, John 44, that
John 6:44.
Yeah, I'm sorry, 6:44. None come to me except that which my Father has sent. And also, I love you love me because I first loved you, kind of thing, as well. And that's really.
It's God that's the catalyst.
Oh yeah, God's been
always.
chasing me. Billy Graham calls him the hound of heaven. God's been chasing me my whole life, and I was fortunate enough in my mid-20s to find out that I needed to just stop running and let Him catch me. And ever since then, my life has really been full of peace and security, even though my circumstances have changed many times over those years. Raising 5 children, is not an easy task.
Oh.
And sometimes you wonder whether you can even handle it. Being a father and providing for all your children, you see so many men, run away from families with one child because they can't take it. All those things, none of those things matter. The burden of family, which can be burdensome, we all know. The jobs can be burdensome. None of those things matter once you have Christ designing and running your life. If He can build the universe, He can certainly build a plan for me that I need to pay attention to and live by. And that's really where my peace comes from, is that, and I mean it sincerely, is that I've never felt during this whole process, I've felt down at some times, just in the last couple of months actually, just because I didn't expect some of the things to keep coming
The
afterwards.
secondary issues.
Right, the secondary issues. But those are just emotions. The ability to handle things day to day, peace-wise, has never left me. God has just been with me and walking with me the whole time. And I've never had a loss of knowing that He wasn't there right beside me.
And so because of that, right, God's constant when nothing else around is.
Oh, absolutely.
And because of that, we can celebrate,
Absolutely.
right? Celebrating who God is takes away, right, me depending on external circumstances. All of a sudden, that's an internal decision I make,
Absolutely.
right? Because God has drawn me in, and it forces me to shift my perspective to an eternal, unchanging God who says, I will never leave you nor forsake you.
Absolutely. And probably the best thing that happened out of all this is my devotions and my study used to be poquito,
A little small.
in the morning. And Lord started waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and spending hours with Him. And that's just been a new season, and it's really changed my life that way. I tell people that they ask me about the cancer, and I say, well, I'm thankful that I had cancer, and they give me this, look like,
Sure.
What are you nuts? And I'm like, no, it's changed my whole perspective on who God really is in my life. If He really is the God of the universe and the God who loves me, not just this great idea that Kevin has,
Oh man, Kevin, I want to thank you for
thank
sharing
you.
your story. I want to thank you for reminding us that even here, right, this is a story. This is God's story. That when we accept His invitation, I'm sure you've prayed a lot And as you said, Paquito to begin with, right? That's increased. As you've accepted that invitation to pray, right, to just that confidence, right, that you have, that Kevin exudes. I want to thank you for sharing that story, that you would, as the psalmist writes, you would say, the Lord is good. His unfailing love endures forever in spite of all the craziness.
Absolutely. And you know, one last thing is the prayer. The prayer life for me and the people, I've literally had, you know, thousands upon thousands of people praying for me. Went on vacation into Tennessee, a friend and his whole church was praying for me. Just very humbling. My friends in Florida, I went to see them, same thing. And just all the people who were praying for me here in the church and my family. It's very humbling.
Well, it's an honor, man, to be your friend, to have walked through this in a small way alongside you and Susan and the family. And thanks for sharing the story today. You know, we're going to go to another moment, time here of worship. And I invite you, right? We always have things we can choose to celebrate. And if nothing else is going right in your life, which for many of us in this experience, for Kevin, for so many, everything seems unsettled. If that's you, man, during this next little moment of worship, would you choose to focus on that verse there in Psalm 105? Would you remind yourself that the Lord is good and that we can choose to celebrate him for who he is today and who he will always be for all our tomorrows? Let's go to a time of worship. Oh man, I want to thank Kevin Evans so much for his transparency and his willingness to share with all of us today the journey that God has him, his wife, and his family on. If anything, I would invite you guys, would you guys pray for them and their family, for God to continue to meet him and for healing for them. And we're going to continue to pray for that throughout this entire journey that God has Kevin on. Right? And so for all of us as people of God, again, we're a people of celebration. And there are things we can always choose to celebrate. As we looked at with Kevin, right, we can choose to celebrate God for who he is, but let's not forget, we can also choose to celebrate God for what he has done. And during this series, we've been inviting you guys to share your stories, and we've had some great stories. I wish we had all the time in the world to share all the stories, so we're just not able to do that, but I want to highlight some of those stories because God has done some pretty amazing things. And I think what's true for you, for me, is even if I'm in that season where God hasn't quite done that thing yet that I've been praying for, maybe there's been that mountain that you have brought to God in prayer, and either he said yes, or maybe he said no, or maybe he's just said not yet. The encouragement for all of us is to hear the stories of God moving those mountains in different people's lives, and that just blesses all of us because, again, God continues to do great things. He's always at work. And one of the best things I can do as a pastor here is to help communicate that to all of you. It's good for all of us to hear that. I think of Psalms 126, verse 3, the psalmist writes, "The Lord has done great things for us, and we are filled with joy." That is true. Right? That is a truth, and it's something all of us can cling to. We can celebrate God for who he is, but we can also choose to celebrate God for what he has done. The Lord has done great things for us, and we are filled with joy. I think about Jenny Barnett. Jenny, if you're watching this, shout out to you. You're awesome. We love you. What a blessing you are to so many. Jenny is a single gal. And Jenny is amazing. If you know Jenny, she leads one of our life groups Tuesday nights. Also, shout out to all the ladies there. I bet you guys have a name for your group. If you're watching right now on the Facebook feed, man, tell us, what's the name of your group right there? They meet Tuesday nights at 6:30. And she has got an amazing group of ladies that meet in that group. And Jenny is just amazing in her own right. If you spend time with Jenny, you get the sense of just pure servanthood and joy. Well, Jenny had a curveball thrown at her a few months ago. She wasn't feeling quite right, and she was talking to some family and friends. They said, maybe you should go to the doctor. So she goes to the doctor. She doesn't have a lot of experience at the doctor. She goes to the doctor, and they do a scan, and they realize that she has a significant blockage in her heart. And they schedule her for emergency triple bypass open heart surgery. Jenny goes into the hospital. I find out later, right? Jenny's never been in the hospital. Her first time ever going into the hospital, can you imagine this, is for triple bypass open heart surgery. So she immediately goes in. She goes through the surgery, goes by smoothly and cleanly. She comes out of surgery. She's back home within a matter of days. Like, I can't even imagine that, right? You're cracking your chest, you're going in, the whole thing. She gets home, and the outpour of love and affection from family, friends, Harbor family here, her life group ladies that support her, care for her, pray for her, is overwhelming. And not that recovery is not without its ups and downs and all that, but honestly, Jenny has shared with me, man, God has been so faithful, right? God has been so good that God caught this, right? I mean, she very easily could have died if not for her just kind of feeling off and going in the hospital, that they could get her in right away, that the surgery went cleanly and smoothly, and that recovery really, all things being equal, has been pretty smooth. And Jenny today, she would be the first one to tell you she is celebrating God for what he has done. He has done great things for her. And I can tell you, man, if you were to spend any time with Jenny, she is filled with joy because of that. That's one of the stories here at Harbor. I think about Cable and Emily Yarn. Cable and Emily Yarn, oh my goodness, man, I love this couple. They're one of those couples, right? You just sit down with them and you're like, wow, these are smart people. Both Cable and his wife Emily, man, they are high capacity, highly intelligent, highly driven, highly compassionate people. They were in my wife and I's life group for a while. They're now part of the Heimerls life group. They're just an amazing couple. But the last 2 years in particular have been overwhelming for them. They own a couple different businesses, right? And financially and just economically in the midst of COVID and all of this, that's been a struggle. His dad, Cable's mom died suddenly and tragically. On top of that, his dad, after losing his wife, finds out that he has cancer. And then on top of that, they had bought a coffee shop in downtown Denver called Link. And Link just fell on hard times, partly because of all the economic downturn. And they were going in the red week after week after week, and it was getting harder and harder for them. Well, Cable texted me this last week and said, hey, would you pray for us? We have been asking God to bring a buyer for the business, and it looks like that's going to wrap up. And also, my dad has another scan. Would you pray that he would be found free of cancer? And wouldn't you know it, the very next day, Cable texts me. Right, we add that to the prayer chain. Again, we accept God's invitation to prayer. This is the mountain Cable is asking God to move. And sure enough, the sale of the coffee shop goes through smoothly, right? Answer to prayer. And then also they get a clear report on his dad. He is declared cancer free. Again, I guarantee you today that Cable and Emily, in spite of a difficult couple years, they would say, the Lord has done great things for us and we are filled with joy. I think about also Brenda Ladkow, just an amazing woman here at Harbor Church, amazingly faithful, just wonderful woman who just exudes joy and just has such a servant heart. Man, she serves faithfully in the Harbor Kids Ministry. And this has been a crazy year for her. And particularly crazy because of the East Troublesome Fire that was impacting Granby and Grand Lake and most of the west side of Rocky Mountain National Park. If you're not in the Colorado area, I want to tell you this has been an incredible experience. So many people have been impacted by these fires. And Brenda, she emailed us, right? She sent us the story of how the fire was encroaching closer and closer. She has a cabin up there in the mountains. And it was getting closer and closer. When she went up and visited after they got the fire under control, she sent us some pictures. And it was as though, and she told us, it was as though God just stopped the fire at the fire line right across the street from her cabin, as though God said, you shall not go any further. And she praised God for that because God does good things. And she sent this to us. She said, I was laid off from my job of 20 years and faced the potential destruction of my mountain cabin. And yet God gave me the peace to trust him. I now have a new job starting November 23rd and have seen once again his love and his care in action. Again, the psalmist says in 126:3, the Lord has done great things for us, and we are filled with joy. We can celebrate God for who he is, which is unchanging, and we can choose to celebrate God for what he has done. We're going to go into another moment of worship here. And I just invite you, as we go to this another moment of worship, maybe gather, if you live with some roommates, gather them together. If you've got family with you, kids, whatever it looks like, would you gather together and just remind yourselves, maybe during this next song, would you just, shout out and proclaim, what has God done for you? Maybe it's what God has done for others. And take some time here in this next moment to celebrate what the good things are that God has done in and among us all. Let's do that now. So we can choose to celebrate God for who he is, which is unchanging. And we can cling to that in the midst of the craziness of our lives. We can choose to celebrate God for what he has done, either in our life or the lives of others. We can choose to do that. And lastly here, we can choose to celebrate God for what we believe he will do yet. This is the idea that sustains me through the pain and trials of my own life personally. Right? It's those moments, I'm sure many of you guys can relate, where it's difficult to see that there could even be a light at the end of a tunnel. Maybe even as you watch this and you listen today, you're in the midst of that dark place. Maybe it's dark place financially, relationally, whatever that looks like. Maybe there's disease in your family, something like that it's just hard to see beyond that. It's in those times that we can celebrate God for what we believe he will do yet, right? Scripture tells us that he says, I work all things out for the good of those who are in Christ Jesus. We can cling to that as a truth that we can hold tight to. It's those kind of truths that we have to hold to when we don't see that answer coming, when we're not sure we can see that light in the tunnel. For me, it's those times also when I have visited, communities and environments that just seem a complete mess. It's trips I've taken to Haiti, where I see a 6 or 7-year-old child who's rooting around in a drainage ditch next to a feral pig. And you're like, Lord, how could you? And it's on those moments I got to go, you know what? God is working a plan. I don't understand it all. I don't know when, but I know he will say enough is enough someday. It's when I've worked in right alongside some of our missionaries in Thailand, when we visited shanty villages, right? Villages without any running water, without any electricity, who are steeped in paganism and idolatry. And you go, Lord, how long? And I have to remind myself that God is working out a story greater and more amazing than I can ever hope or imagine. It's clinging to that hope of what is unseen. Right? It's our folks that serve down at Casa de la Esperanza down in Mexico, who are serving at this children's home that takes in children, these orphans who have incredibly painful stories. And you go, Lord, how long? And yet we can choose to celebrate God for what we believe he will do yet. This is the step of faith, to trust God for what we cannot yet see. This is choosing to believe God has a plan. This is choosing to believe in what the Apostle John records for us in the book of Revelation. Right? The Apostle John, he's given this opportunity, right? God invites him in as he pulls back the curtains on heaven and eternity and reveals to John God's plan at the end of time. And John, you read this book and you realize John is trying, right? He's at a loss for words. He doesn't even know how to describe the things he's seen, but he's doing his best. But I love this passage in Revelation 21:4 that we can count on and trust in. And it says this. It says, he, Jesus, will wipe every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. All these things are gone forever. I read that and I remind myself in my own personal moments when I can't see that light at the end of the tunnel. I remind myself of this verse when I'm working in situations where people have overwhelming pain in their lives. I remind myself of this. I cling to it because my God is true and he's never led me or others astray. No, he says he will. There is coming a day that every day we take brings us closer to this day where he will wipe every tear from their eyes, where there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain, that all these things will be gone forever. And because that is true, I can choose to celebrate him today. And so as we wrap up this message today, I want to share with you a story and a letter that Linda Harris, oh my word, sweet Linda Harris. If you know Linda here, she's on our welcome team at the church. She comes in, she wipes down tables, right? And she is typically dressed in purple. It matches her hair. Shout out to Linda if you're watching this. But Linda is the sweetest thing. And she sent this, speaking of celebrating God for what he has yet to do. She writes this letter. She says, "Dear Joel, my 56-year-old son David and his 33-year-old son Justin have had an estranged relationship for some time. Mistakes have been made on both sides. They love each other and want a good relationship, but are afraid to reach out and be hurt again. I bet many of us in our family dynamics can relate to some of this." Linda goes on. She says, "I began a prayer journal about a month ago. My prayer was for the healing of the relationship between Justin and his father. I asked the Spirit for guidance if I could help. This week, I knew I had to text my grandson." She says, "I don't even text very often. My text said that I had started a prayer journal and I needed to know what specifics Justin needed from a relationship with his father. Well, lo and behold, Justin called me. He began to tell me how much he wanted to laugh and joke with his father as they used to. Justin had now advanced to supervisor of 4 jobs in a large construction company. He was happy, he was secure, respected, and appreciated. He wanted to share this with his father because all that he had become was due to what he had learned from his father. The best part of this story is that when Justin called, his father David was standing in my kitchen and had heard every word that Justin had said. The tears started running down his cheeks. How could the Lord have planned things any better? Justin went on and said, I guess I need to take the first step and call him. All the while, right, David, his father's in the background. I, Linda, advised her grandson while praying hard to the Spirit for the right words to speak from his heart and simply ask forgiveness. To tell your father you love him and want to see him and no more. Then wait and allow the Spirit to guide your father. David went home before Justin and I finished our call. Justin doesn't know his father heard our conversation. I asked Justin to pray to the Spirit for the right words before he called his father and trust his guidance. I know the Spirit will be there to guide their words. When Justin does call, I know that his father will call me." And in all caps, Linda closes out and says, God is so good. We can choose to celebrate God for what we believe by faith he will do yet. Thank you, Linda, for sharing that email. What a testimony to all of us that God is always working behind the scenes. It's by God's grace and sovereignty that Justin calls right when his father is in the room and can hear that conversation. And so, Linda, we are joining you. Right? We're celebrating God for the answer to this prayer that has yet to come and praying for the reconciliation of David and Justin. Right? Because here's the deal. Accepting God's invitation to pray results in stories of celebration because we are a people who are designed and meant for celebration. And so today, man, I invite you to be a part of that, right? We can choose today, no matter how crazy, painful, difficult your life is, you can choose today to celebrate God for who he is. You can choose today to celebrate God for what he has done. And you can choose today to celebrate God for what he will do yet. So this is your homework. Here's your homework for this next week and really for this entire series. I want you to pick one of the scriptures that we referenced here, the Psalms passages or the Revelation passage. I want you to memorize one of those. All 3 would be amazing. Bonus points if you do that, right? You pick one of the scriptures and one of those points. Maybe it's this week I'm going to celebrate God for who he is, based on the Psalm 100 passage. Maybe for you, I'm going to celebrate God for what he has done, right? The Psalm 126, or I'm going to celebrate God for what he has not done yet, but I believe he will, the Revelation 21 passage. I want you to memorize it and choose in this season, in this moment, to turn your focus toward him and to that celebration. Because in the midst of all of this, celebration, it elevates our soul, in spite of our circumstances. We're going to go back again to another moment of worship. And man, would you just claim the truth of one or all of those scriptures for you, for your family, for this day, believing that celebration elevates our soul in spite of our circumstances. Let me pray. God, we thank you for today. We praise you. We praise you for who you are. You are Lord of Lords and King of Kings, and that is unchanging. We celebrate you for what you have done, what you've done in Jenny's life, what you've done in Cable and Emily's life, what you've done in Brenda's life. We celebrate and praise you for that, what you've done in our lives. And we celebrate you for what you are yet to do, what you're yet to do in Linda's family, between her son David and Justin, in our own lives, in the lives of those around our neighborhoods and our families around the world, that there is coming a time where you will wipe every tear away, where there will be no death, and you will be with us. And you will set all things right. We celebrate you for that today. Would you meet us now in these next moments? In Jesus' name, amen.